Hey everybody, welcome back to RPG Imaginings. I got a package in the mail today, and this is a role-playing game product that has been one of the most highly anticipated over the last 3 years in the hobby. And I'm very excited to be able to unbox it for you today. This was sent to me early by Chaosium Incorporated, and so thank you, Chaosium, for sending this package to me. I'm excited to showcase it on the channel because I've been talking about it for the last couple of years, and many gamers in my audience have been talking about it for many years, and here we finally are. And so let's check it out. The trusty X-Acto knife is working. I managed not to cut myself, so success. And here we go. Big box. Chaosium always does a great job of asking their distributors to pack things well because they know that their fans appreciate products that are delivered in mint condition. And this is going to be no exception. Okay, and as per usual, we have our classic package within a package here, and so let's continue on. The Pendragon role-playing game has been a favorite of many people. I just checked out the 5th edition core book of Pendragon a couple years ago, as well as what is considered to be one of the most classic campaigns ever written for a role-playing game, which is the Great Pendragon campaign. And here we have it, folks, the Pendragon starter set. The box is definitely bigger than prior Chaosium releases and thinner as well. And so this is a very unique product for Chaosium as starter sets go. All you need for adventure in a world of chivalry and honor, Greg Stafford. Now, there's a little disclaimer that I want to throw out there before we get started, because this role-playing game and this starter set is based off of the Arthurian legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and people often have a lot of questions about both the historical context of this game as well, or of this legend, as well as what are all the historical references that go into this. And if you are looking to go down a rabbit hole, investigate the history, both historical and literary, of King Arthur, and you will be prepared for hours and hours and hours of scholarship that has been dedicated to King Arthur. So my basic understanding, and anybody in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm happy to admit, is that the original elements of the story of King Arthur are a combination of Celtic and Welsh in tradition. As the tale has spread from Britain to other parts of Europe, largely Brittany, which is in France, French authors have added their own little additions, and throughout the years, people have added and altered the legend throughout time. So modern conceptions of King Arthur frequently draw from multiple different sources. As we delve into the Pendragon role-playing game and this starter set, I think something that is very important to keep in mind is that your Pendragon will vary, and you should engage on whatever parts of the Arthurian legend you want to or do not want to engage with. If you're interested in literary history, they're basically what I would consider to be several definitive origins of the modern tale. The first one is History of Roman Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth, which sort of codified a lot of past writings together into a quasi-historical argument of Arthur being a post-Roman king who was protecting Britain from Anglo-Saxons. is my understanding. That was written in about 1130 AD. Then in the 1500s, I want to say somewhere around 1540, Sir Thomas Malory published Les Morts d'Arthur, which was based upon Arthurian romances that had been published over the prior several hundred years. And I believe that the French added Lancelot to the mix and added the Holy Grail to the mix. The sword Excalibur has been described in many different capacities over the course of the legend, either as Caliborn, pulled from the Sword in the Stone, and then Excalibur, which was given to Arthur after he broke Caliborn, and Excalibur was given to him by the Lady of the Lake. Some legends argue that Caliborn and Excalibur are one and the same. It's a mess, but it's a fun mess. And then in the 1950s, T.H. White's The Once and Future King was published, which that was a series of short books, all of them that get really darker in tone as you go along. The first book is the basis for the Disney adaptation of The Sword in the Stone. But then the darker elements of Arthur's tale are told later on in the Once and Future King series of books. And so the legend here goes really deep and has been cited over and over and over again by various authors, all who have added to the tale. One of the interesting things that I read in preparation for this video is that American authors tend to add more democratic principles to the tale of King Arthur, whether those were actually present in the prior series or not. And so, any work of art, whether this beautiful artwork, which is on the back of the box, or the written word, so I mentioned that Geoffrey of Monmouth's was a quasi-historical account. It was intended to be a historical account, but as we all know, the winners wrote history. And so basically people who had money, power, who won battles, altered history as they saw fit. Les Morts d'Arthur is written in Middle English, somewhere between Chaucer and Shakespeare. And so people say that if you can understand Shakespeare, you can probably do okay with Les Morts d'Arthur, but it is challenging. And of course, the 1950s, I think it was 57 or 58, Once and Future King, is written in more or less modern English, but it is a fantasy tale retelling of the story. I've read The Once and Future King and loved it. I highly recommend it. So Pendragon is a role-playing game set in King Arthur's Britain. You take on the role of knights and overcome mythical monsters, rival knights, and other wondrous challenges in search for glory. The Pendragon starter set presents a world of great adventure. This is the time of the Sword in the Stone, of the Boy King and Merlin and their struggles against those who would seize the crown for themselves, and the flowering of chivalry. This is a time of desperate battles, dark portents, enchanted forests, pride, and self-indulgence. What kind of knight are you? And I think that fairly introduces the depth of this game. There's a lot of depth to Pendragon, the role-playing game, in that it is not just about battle and martial struggles. It's also about court intrigue and investigation of wild areas of the world, and really lofty themes like what does it mean to be king of a land, and why did chivalry develop, and what is the conception behind the Knights of the Round Table. And so here we see a lot of the things that are in the box, but this picture is not exhaustive. It looks like they had to take this picture before they had all the components in. I would also recommend James McAleer's excellent Gaming Gang video of the unboxing of Pendragon that he released about a week ago. I will be releasing this video on release day, so if you're watching this now, I shot this on Wednesday afternoon, and I'll be releasing it on Thursday the 29th when the Pendragon starter set hits stores. Let's check it out. So we have the classic What's in This Box sheet, which is a critical component of any sort of box set for those of us who have been interested in box sets as a role-playing game product for decades and decades and decades. So basic summary, we have 3 books, we have some appendices, additional rules and setting details introduced as you play through the Sword campaign, 8 pre-generated characters, battle cards, which this is a new addition to Chaosium starter set products, and so I'm very interested to check this out. We have our dice right here. Pendragon is interesting in that it is different than many Chaosium role-playing games in that it is not based off of D100, it is based off of D20, but like many of the BRP games, it is a roll-under system. So for most of the tasks that you're going to attempt that require a roll, you're going to roll a D20, and you're going to try to roll under the target number. And then we have 66 in gold, and so we have this blue and gold, royal blue and gold color scheme, very royal colors, and it matches the picture that we have here on the What's in the Box, and so they're the dice that come with it. So we have the What's in this box, and on the opposite side we have an advertisement for RuneQuest, role-playing in Glorantha. Love it. Beautiful artwork as always. Okay, books. Starting with book 1, The Adventure of the Sword and the Stone. Because Pendragon was so highly anticipated, what Chaosium did is they released a sort of starter adventure a year or 2 ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. And my understanding is that this solo quest adventure is intended to pick up from the adventure that was released by Chaosium earlier. My understanding, notice that the author credit given here is Greg Stafford. Larkins is also one of the authors on this, David Larkins. And so this is one of the last major works that Greg Stafford worked on before he passed. He was working on the definitive Pendragon before he passed. And this was, I've heard Greg say that this was his favorite role-playing game, the most favorite thing that he produced over his time in terms of game design. So we have the solo quest here at the beginning, the introductory components of it, and then the actual solo quest adventure. And for those of you who are not familiar with solo quest is a gaming style, sort of like choose your own adventure. Here we have a Le Morte d'Arthur quote from Sir Thomas Malory. And this allows individuals to essentially get the feel for what a game plays like just on their own. And Chaosium has solo quest style individual adventures in all of their starter set products, and they do a really good job of showcasing how their games play. And since Call of Cthulhu 7th edition released Alone Against the Flame as part of 7th edition, we have seen solo adventures creeping into a lot more role-playing books, and I'm very pleased to see that. So we have some basic understanding of how the rules work in Pendragon, and then we have the Adventure of the Sword in the Stone, which is in numbered segments that you read through a passage, you make some decisions, you roll some dice or both, and it directs you towards another passage. And of course, I'm not going to show you the pages of this because the idea is that you would work through this and make decisions on your own and find out what happens. And this seems like a very lengthy solo quest adventure here in this book, and so I'm very excited to check this out. All right. Book 2, The Fabled Realm, 6th edition rules and setting. And so We have a picture of a spear wielder here surrounded by hunting dogs, and we see some sort of creature in the background. So this is not just a historical setting, it is a fantasy historical setting in which there are monsters or creatures that are present there as well. Chapter 1, Another World, Another Time, and we see a beautiful map of post-Roman England, I guess is the time period here. When scholars engage on King Arthur as a historical figure, many people will argue that King Arthur, or the equivalent of him, was linked to his historical figure in post-Roman Britain around the 4th or 5th century, likely a highly popular warlord that lived somewhere in the south of England here. But did King Arthur exist as he exists in the tales in history? Almost certainly not, but that doesn't mean that we can't draw on this wonderful legend and have an awesome time role playing with it. And so this chapter is going to be really critical because one of the things I think that makes Pendragon different from a lot of role-playing games is that, like some role-playing games, we cannot assume that the social rules that we abide by in our current time are the same social rules that apply in the context of the game that we are playing. And there are no two better examples of that, I would argue, than Chaosium's Pendragon and Chaosium's RuneQuest, where you need to learn the customs of the realm to understand how role-playing works within the Pendragon setting. If you are looking for a role-playing game that is different, but arguably much awesomer than other fantasy role-playing games that are out there, Pendragon is going to be your thing. Because as a knight, you are following very explicit social rules and roles that exists for knights during this time period. Now, we are going to bend those rules a little bit so that any modern gamer, of course, can participate in the game. And here we get on to Chapter 2, the game system. Okay, and when you roll dice, and so this game system uses D6, D20, and D3s as the primary dice that we're using. And there's information here about success levels that we have in Pendragon. Success levels in Pendragon are success, critical success, failure, or fumble. We have how to go about opposed resolution and adding modifiers to things, how experience checks work, and then probably the crowning achievement of Pendragon, in my personal opinion, in addition to the setting in of itself, and this had leaked over into RuneQuest when RuneQuest was developed. Although, correct me in the comments, there are going to be people who are going to be stronger RPG historians than I am. I'm not sure whether RuneQuest or Pendragon did traits or passions first, or whether one of them has traits and one of them has passions, but the traits and passions system is great. And basically what it comes down to is that in Pendragon, you will have traits that are defined as a continuum between two binaries. Okay? Each of these binaries do not necessarily carry equal weight. I would argue, as someone who teaches critical thinking in an education college, that the more you examine continuum thinking over binary thinking, the better off you'll be and the better decisions that you will make. Because it is very rare in life that decisions are either or, yes or no, black or white. Okay, so we have chaste versus lustful, energetic versus lazy, forgiving versus vengeful, generous versus selfish, honest versus deceitful, just versus arbitrary, merciful versus cruel, modest versus proud, prudent versus reckless, spiritual versus worldly, temperate versus indulgent, trusting versus suspicious, valorous versus cowardly. And so basically there will be a D20 number that is assigned to each of these traits. For example, honest might have 16 and deceitful 4. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we look at some of the pre-gens, but this is a way for characters to test their actions versus their characters' traits. And I think that it's a very easy way to encourage role players to roll their character as intended and to be okay with the fact that if they have a character that is highly chaste, it would be very unlikely that they would engage in lustful action depending upon the circumstances. And so it adds drama to the situation. And then we have passions, and passions are once again defined by D20 rolls, and testing passions can help to determine how characters would feel about a particular situation. The key passions being homage to a lord, fealty to a lord. Homage is the highest type of loyalty. The act of homage is given when a knight swears their service to a lord as a member of their household, or when they receive a grant of land from their lord, which is an enormous honor, versus fealty, which is a loyalty oath. Lords, knights, and even some commoners employ fealty as a sort of standard feudal contract. Lords make the oath to their king, knights to their liege lords, and mercenaries and professionals, such as stewards and clerks, swear to a lord. A character may swear fealty to multiple lords, whether in exchange for landholding, membership in an organization, or similar promises. We have loyalty to companions. We have loyalty to the king. We have passions of fervor, hate, person or group, love, family, love, person. Passions of adoratio, passions of adoration, adoration, beloved, devotion to a deity. Passion of civilatus, chivalry, hospitality, station, afflictions, madness, glory, melancholy, misery. And then we have our skills chapter. There are far fewer skills in Pendragon than there are in many other Chaosium releases. We have combat skills, courtly skills, knightly skills, and woodcraft skills. And the skills in the game fit on 2 pages. We have awareness, battle, chirurgery is the delicate art of keeping the mostly dead alive. Interesting. Compose, courtesy, dancing, falconry, first aid, flirting, folklore, gaming. Horsemanship, hunting, intrigue, literacy, orate, play instrument, recognize, religion, singing, and stewardship. And I'm particularly interested in stewardship and in courtesy, because one of the things that I love particularly about Pendragon is that you spend time at court negotiating intrigue at court, politics, etc. And I find that particularly interesting. Chapter 5, Honor and Glory. Okay, how do we gain honor? How do we lose honor? How do we gain glory? Glory is the measure of fame accumulated for deeds done. Only nobles gain glory. Glory can increase but never decrease. Bad behavior results in loss of honor, but not glory. In fact, successful bad behavior adds to glory just as surely as successful good behavior. And we all know, and I'm sad to say it, that this models human relations in real life, I'm sad to say. You could have really bad people engaging in bad behavior, but it will increase their glory. It requires public acclamation. Deeds done in secret or that go unobserved and unannounced gain no glory. And Glory is really interesting because in Pendragon, because it is a mechanic that is essentially something that is compounded over the life of a character, and I literally mean the life of a character. Pendragon characters go through multiple decades of their life and then can be retired, and you get a new character, perhaps as a squire. So under the proper circumstances, any non-routine act may win glory. There are two requirements: the successful resolution of an action with notable consequences and public knowledge of the deed. Glory can accrue for winning a combat, for obtaining a social position, witnessing great actions. Passive glory is a special type of award that automatically accrues each winter phase. The characters included in this starter set earn passive glory in one of two ways: appeal value and traits and passions. All right, Chapter 6, Combat. And so we have a action resolution table just like in RuneQuest, but it looks like a more simplified table compared to RuneQuest. How combat works with melee and missile distances. Charges, of course. Arms and armor, including melee weapons. Period appropriate, of course. Wow, that is some great artwork. Okay. Shields, and then we have horses. Horses are super important in this time, in this game. You have combat-trained horses, non-combat trained horses, horse types, and horse armor. We have injury and health. That is cool. I really like that. Wealth and treasure. Wow. Some great artwork here. And then the winter phase, which is a special phase that takes place in between more rigorous adventuring in the Pendragon realm. So military campaigns in the winter are rare. Britain is not subject to deep snowfalls or extensive icing over, but the weather is cold and wet nonetheless. In particular, any road, trail, or path not of Roman make becomes a quagmire of mud. No one goes out if it is not strictly necessary. But winter is also a time of training and study, amorous pursuits, and gossip. In game terms, the players update their characters to reflect the experiences of the past year. They do this after the end of each adventure during the winter phase. There we go. And here we have a partial map of England. This is something that Chaosium has been doing in their recent starter sets, that you put these maps together and they become maps of the setting. And so it looks like we got a little bit of an overlap there. Here's how these maps overlap to make a bigger map of England. Cool. Okay. And then, last but certainly not least, Book 3, The Sword Campaign, a 6th edition introductory campaign. And this seems pretty darn meaty to me. Now, I'm not going to go through this one extensively because obviously we don't want spoilers from players. But there is, I would say, weeks, many sessions of gaming material in this campaign. And so the introductory chapter here sort of sets it up. And it begins with the adventure of the sword tournament in year 510. And then there are several big chapters in here that basically go in through the time through which the sword is drawn from the stone all the way through obtaining Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. And I don't consider those spoilers because people have been talking about this story for like 700 years. Okay? We are well beyond the point of spoilers. But what's interesting about Pendragon, of course, is that you have an opportunity to play this story from the perspective of your player knights. And perspective is a really interesting storytelling tool, in my opinion. We have Appendix E here, Mercenary and Household Knights, which is going to take place as part of this campaign. You may wonder where Appendix A through D are. We are getting there. Okay? And so here we have Lower England, including Londinium. And so, yeah, what a gorgeous map. Okay. Maps are not as big of an importance in Pendragon because player knights don't really have access to accurate maps during this time period. Okay. So there are the books. Love it. Next, Appendices. I was originally questioning why they did this, but it turns out the back of the box explains the box. We have this saying in gaming, okay? In Magic, we say, reading the card explains the card, okay? Because a lot of the times people have questions and we're like, well, did you read the card? No. Well, then there you go, okay? Reading the back of the box explains the box. Who'da thunk, okay? So the back of the box explains that these are additional nuances that you can add to the Pendragon rules, which will no doubt be fleshed out in great detail in the core book, releasing sometime over the next year or so, that can really add a lot of depth to a Pendragon game. And these rules have been around for a long time, but I really love that the team included this in the starter set because, if I recall correctly, in past iterations of Pendragon, entire small splat books were dedicated to different components of the realm. And I'm not saying that that's a bad plan at all. You know, I love me a good splat book for role-playing games. But from a cost standpoint, this gives you a nice little taste of either what's coming up or gives you a really thorough potential role-playing experience right out of the gate. Chaosium makes starter sets for gamers, folks. Okay, this is a $30 set, which is a really low price point in this day and age for a starter set. And I can't tell you how to feel in the audience, but I would at the same time encourage you to recognize that this is a very generous price point for what you are getting within the box. I've seen dozens upon dozens of starter sets in my day, and nobody does it better than Chaosium is doing right now. And although I have not seen all the contents of this box, it's pretty clear here that we have a winner. So Appendix A, tournaments. What happens during tournaments? What about Joust? Okay, well, Joust didn't really exist during this time. Okay, surprises a lot of people. Battle. Okay, running a battle. This is a multi-page booklet. Fighting the battle. Remember, this is going to be larger scale than just typical small skirmish tactics that occur in fantasy role-playing games. What happens if you surrender? How do we deal out glory? A battle system reference. Nice. Okay, Appendix C, overland movement. Weather really needs to be a significant character in of itself in a Pendragon game, I would say. So types of travel, cargo, wheeled vehicles and cargo, maps are very rare during this time. Appendix D, visiting a foreign court. Oh, you better be careful or you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. What happens if you meet foreign knights on patrol? What about at the gate of a foreign castle? What if you were dining at a lord or lady's table? Will the entertainment look like? How can you maintain diplomacy and not put your foot in your mouth and get yourself into a war? What if someone is spying at court or you are spying at court? Lots of cool additions that can happen. Folks, this fantasy role-playing game is so much more than killing things and taking their stuff. And if you like killing things and taking your stuff, a lot of the time I like killing things and taking their stuff. Okay? I play those games too. I don't not play fun things, but I also like variety in my gaming as well. And I would encourage anybody in the audience to explore the wealth of role-playing games that exist out there. Because there's just some really cool alternate storytelling means than just a basic kill stuff and take its treasure style of fantasy role-playing. If you are a theater kid and you like fantasy role-playing game, check out Pendragon, okay? There's no better game, I would argue, for a theater kid than Pendragon, the role-playing game. So here we have some cards. These are a new edition, and these are on really nice cardstock. They're perforated so you can separate them yourself. And it looks to me, let's just read this top one over here, Knights of Gore. Stern men from the kingdom of Gore, far to the north. These knights may look a bit archaic, but they fight as well as any knights. There are as many Knights of Gore as there are player knights. The knights may countercharge. And if we look at the back, there are stats. And so this looks like these are kind of random encounter cards that you can use. So we have Breton mercenary knights, Cambrian archers, Pictish knife men. And then here it looks like we have player goals. Rescue captive knights, capture the banner, fight enemy commander, with details on stats for those individuals and how to adjudicate the battles, just sort of quick things that can be done. These are really useful additions because maybe you're in an interim part of your game. Maybe a critical player is missing that evening and you still want a game. You can still play Pendragon with these with that player missing, but the player isn't going to miss out on the really critical aspects of gaming. And then, last but certainly not least, we have the pre-gens in this lovely fold-out style with great artwork. So Pendragon has chosen more of a realistic art style for it. Sorry about the camera shake there. And we have several components on the character sheet. Characters' history and events. There are none here because you're going to add these through play. Knightly events. When were they born? When were they squired? When were they knighted? When were they landed? When did they join the round table? When were they ennobled? And when did they die? Passive glory. Heraldry, their coat of arms. Basic information about the character. Their characteristics. Wounds. Skills. Details on their horses. Sir Clarion has a warhorse named Charger. He the good boy. Equipment, traits. So coming back to this idea of traits, traits are on a 20 scale and they are all in balance with each other, but that balance does not mean equal balance. So notice here on Sir Clarion that Sir Clarion has an even balance between honest and deceitful, but he is far more just than he is arbitrary. And depending upon the particular trait, that will influence difficult spots ethical spots that your knight could find themselves in, which I always love adding ethical dilemmas to a role-playing table. It really gets players to think. Puzzles are much, much more than logic puzzles. You can have ethical puzzles. And they're great surprises as a game master because you don't know what your players are going to come up with. And they usually come up with something that really informs the story and is pretty amazing. Oh, darn it. The horse's name isn't Charger. Rats. Okay. I wanted the name to be Charger, but Charger is apparently just a charging horse. Sir Evrain, a mercenary knight. He's very lustful, but also very valorous and generous. Can get a lot of complexity in these trait components. Dame Linnell. Beautiful heraldry here. Okay. Details. She's currently a squire. She has not yet been knighted, but there are opportunities for that. In Pendragon and in many modern role-playing games, we don't limit ourselves on historical accuracy of what particular gender-identifying people would say or do. So we have female knights here in Pendragon, and they engage just as the same way as male knights, because we don't want anybody sitting at our tables, okay, experiencing misogyny and sexism within a game. They got to deal with that all the time, okay? So we don't want those things happening within our games. We want people to feel welcome at their at our tables, and we also want them to feel like they are reflected in their characters, okay? So some characters, if you were non-binary, for example, I would say that Sir Avaloc, or you could just say Avaloc, would be a character that would be accessible to a non-binary player. Dame Tamura. We have Warhorse, additional horses. Dame Tamura is highly spiritual and honest, but she's also very proud. Yeah, pride can get us into trouble. As they say, pride comes before the fall. Cadwallon. I like this pick this knight if in the lower right-hand corner, because that helps people to make informed decisions. If you just hand out the pre-generated characters and people aren't sure, like, well, I don't know what these characters do mechanically and, you know, what their status is. Dame Quendhild. Okay. Of Saxon origin. A crow is her standard. She is indulgent, worldly, but also energetic. These traits are not hard and fast rules, they're guidelines. Sir Asterius. Looks like he's rocking some Roman armor that he found. Okay, he's Greek in origin, born in Aleppo. Let's check out his equipment. Cool. Yep. 1d6 pounds in Roman gold. And he is pretty balanced. Merciful, modest, spiritual, generous, chaste. He has a lot of really balanced traits. Plays Sir Asterius if you enjoy playing strangers in a strange land. You know, people tend to think that cultures were entirely isolated. I think an argument could be made that we do a lot of personally enforced isolation in modern times. And playing this game could get you thinking about the human transfer that existed between populations. Human travel has been happening for a long time, even during this post-Roman Arthurian period that is featured in Pendragon, the role-playing game. We are on to the reboxing. Okay, we have the cards. Great edition. These feel really nice, like really nice cardstock with a really good finish on them. We have various appendices to add depth to your game. We have Book 3, The Sword Campaign, Desolata Role-Playing. Book 2, The Fabled Realm, information about the rules and the setting. We have the Solo Quest Adventure, The Adventure of the Sword in the Stone. And then, what the is in the box? People who have seen Seven understand the reference. Okay. And dice. Not those dice, these dice. Beautiful edition. All right. It's a larger but skinnier box for Chaosium starter sets. Okay, so keep that in mind. But gosh, I really enjoyed showing this to all of you. And once again, a big thank you to Chaosium for sending this to me a little early so that I had a chance to shoot a thorough video in anticipation of the launch on Thursday, June 29th. All right, and so post your questions or comments down below. This is a very different style of a role-playing game, I would think, for a lot of people. Okay, if you've entered into role-playing in the mainstream and you want to check out something different, there's nothing better that I could recommend for you than Chaosium games in general. But this Pendragon starter set, Chaosium has once again knocked it out of the park. So great job, friends at Chaosium. Congratulations. You have cracked the code of what an awesome starter set should be in the hobby. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.